Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar, which is presented by ECADE. This webinar is part of a series to keep members of the Alliance and our wider network engaged during this time. These sessions aim to create a space to maintain connections among and stimulate our community, which is distant and struggling with solitude due to COVID-19 control measures. ECADE will use this platform to continue the capacity development and sensitization of grassroots human rights defenders and organizations, particularly in the Eastern Caribbean. It will also serve to highlight issues and activities of note. Each session will provide an activist within ECADE's network the opportunity to share their knowledge and experience and further develop their facilitation and presentation skills. Today we discuss the issues faced Today we discuss mothering with a gender lens. What are the ways in which social justice advocates and organizations, including LGBTQ PLHIV and women organizations can hold space for and serve as allies to mothers within these various communities. Today's session, Womanist Mothering with a Gender Lens, a conversation on raising a gender-sensitive child, real stories, real talk, is led by Kellyanne Knight, mother, researcher, and advocate. Kellyanne is a Barbadian Afro-Caribbean activist and advocate for gender equality, women's rights, sexual and reproductive health, and persons living with HIV and AIDS, PLHIV. She is also a gender specialist and social development researcher and holds a Master's of Science in Gender and Development Studies with distinction and a Bachelor of Science in Social Studies with minors in Psychology, Management, and Gender and Development Studies, both from the University of the West. During her time at UWE, she received the first Sonia Mahon Award in recognition of her academic excellence outstanding student in the BSc Social Science program 2014-2015. Passionate about her advocacy for young girls and persons living with HIV, she has also worked with incarcerated women and men. Her research interests and extensive volunteer work over the years include gender justice, sexual and reproductive health, sexuality studies, and gender-based violence. Last but not least, she is the mother of a wonderful 15-year-old daughter. Just a few notes. Please keep in mind that today's session is being recorded for YouTube. Mute your mic when you are not speaking. If you need to make a comment or ask a question, please use the Zoom raise hand option. And as always, let us be respectful in our comments. I will now turn over to Kellyanne Knight, who will take over from here. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Are y'all seeing my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to ECADE for having me and to those of you who have joined our discussion today. First, let me issue a disclaimer. I'm not a counselor, and the views I express in this discussion are my own. And I'm here to share my experiences with you. I don't profess to be an expert at mothering. When mothering, however, I do make it my mandate to be an expert at mothering my child and doing so in the best way possible. Also, I purposely did not want to have this discussion heavily academic, which can get separated too much from reality sometimes or go over the heads of some. So I want the discussion to be really down to earth, and I wish to share some of my stories with you, and I hope not to go off on a tangent as I get passionate when talking about being a mother. So I'll be using my notes along with these slides to help me keep on track, and so I won't go off too much. And I also wish to note that I identify as a mother and a woman most of the time, and I say that to say that I see my identity as one which is also fluid, because I don't see myself fitting within the traditional gender binary at all times. Also, I want us to be mindful of the fact that some women may have children who are not biologically theirs or have been adopted, or children who they have taken guardianship of. Some women may not be biologically able to have children, who may be transgender women, women living with disabilities, also women who have had hysterectomies, are unable to conceive, or even women who have been sexually abused and become mothers by no choice of their own, or persons who are intersex but take on the role of mothering by their own definition. So I want this discussion to be as inclusive as possible, and I hope that you will feel free to share your stories with me and everyone here as well. So, what does mothering mean to you? Mothering to me is an act of parenting that involves conscious efforts of caring, nurturing, and support as it relates to the emotional, physical, and psychological well being of a child or children. It is more than going out there and working to financially support or being involved in the unpaid labor and care work of rearing children. Mothering to me is a spiritual act. If I can get that explained into words, when I say spiritual act, I mean something that I do from deep within my soul, an act that embodies love, whether that child comes from your body or not. It is a conscious effort to love and care for that child or children. It is an act of kindness and compassion. When that child hurts, you hurt. It goes beyond empathy. And to some persons, that definition may sound like a stereotypical notions of mothering, but this can also and should also apply to parents in the whole. But for me, part of mothering is a spiritual act, and that spiritual connection with my child. But that's not all to mothering, as many of us know. We sometimes have to divide ourselves across multiple responsibilities. Discipline can also be tough, or what some people call tough love. And I believe that children should feel safe and comfortable enough to express themselves. However, that does not mean being rude or disrespectful. Being a best friend, some people make a point of insisting that they're not their child's best friend and that you cannot be a friend and a disciplinarian too. But I beg to differ. And this goes back to mothering being involving being that support system that your child needs, especially when peer pressure hits. Mothering is also joy and fun. My daughter, as big as she is, for instance, if I go to school to meet her or wherever, she would run and give me a hug. And she can no longer jump on me because she's about my size. But you know, as some children get older, they see public displays of affection as kind of cringy. And so this goes back to that spiritual mothering, showing affection and love. And this doesn't start in the teenage years. This starts from birth. Every evening from school, it would be, how was your day? Mommy misses you, etc. So things like these help cement the child's belonging, sense of belonging and identity. So when I think about mothering as joy, some photos here. The first one is one of my daughter's toys. A few years back, I opened the freezer to get some ice, and there was this toy in the freezer in a bowl, frozen, and the toy was apparently taking an ice bath. So I mean, little things like that. And then this washing machine box, my daughter, as big as she is, you can see her peeping through the box. I come out and she under this box. So it's things like that. And lately in the Caribbean, y'all will be familiar with fishing wing wing or whatever this guy was saying in this viral video. So these have how our conversations have been going. So motherhood goes beyond, to me, it encompasses a whole heap of things. So let's look at mothering as a social construct, which is influenced by what goes on around us and the ideologies that exist that we sometimes unconsciously live by. As Crawford mentioned, mothering is socially constructed and influenced by our environment, whereby when motherhood is understood as a social construction, deterministic biological assumptions about this gendered role, whether presented as either an ideal or oppressive role for women are undermined. Instead, consideration is given to how this gendered role is influenced and shaped under various economic, social, and cultural, sociocultural, political contexts. So when I think about womanist mothering, Alice Walker coined the term womanist as one who values the soul and the well-being of the Black community, not just Black women, one who is committed to the survival and wholeness of her entire people. She loved the spirit, the folk, women, and herself. Thus, the term womanist expresses Afro-Caribbean, feminist consciousness while being fundamentally culturally and community-oriented. The term womanist consciously connotes that inclusiveness of race and social class and sexuality. Womanism is a social framework which separates itself from feminism. It celebrates womanhood, focuses on Black women, and aims at achieving and maintaining inclusivity in the society. And Walker defined womanists as Black feminists of color who are committed to the wholeness and survival of entire people. And when I was invited to host this webinar, and thanks to ECADE again, and the discussion around the title came up, I chose to use the term womanist mothering from a gender lens because that more speaks to my mothering style and method. Womanist rather than feminist because womanist more speaks to Afrocentric experience, one that is more inclusive, going beyond gender equality, but rather with an intersectional look at gender equality and the choice of words with a gender lens and not through, because mothering and parenting should be with your child rather than an act that is done through or separated from your child. So in the Caribbean, sometimes mothering is attached to womanhood, and that role is often imposed on biological women in some societies. In others, for example, First Nations people in the USA and pre-colonial Yoruba African ethnic groups had indigenous systems where they did not operate on the strict gender binary of man and woman and the stereotypical ideologies that are attached to the gender binary today. Well, to me, these concepts of fitting in strict gender roles as it relates to mothering does not encompass who I am as a Caribbean mother growing up mostly in what we would term single women households, where my grandmother was central to that household and my mother and aunties were present and played an important role in my upbringing, and they were all the sole breadwinners of their household. Hence, when I hear the term single mother as it relates to the Caribbean context, it usually means a household without a permanent father figure. However, many single mother households within the Caribbean society has had the support of a sisterhood of sorts when it comes to the rearing of children, where at some point or the other you would spend time or be kept by a neighbor, an auntie, a grandmother, or your mom's friend. So I have these questions for you, and you can feel free to respond here. So I want you to tell me, what does mothering mean to you? What are your perceptions of Caribbean mothering? Does your economic and social status impact the ways in which mothering is viewed or practiced? Feel free to jump in here and talk. I want this to be a discussion. I don't want me talking to myself. I want this to be a discussion, and you can feel free to um turn on your video so I won't be talking to a blank screen either. So feel free to jump in here. What does mothering mean to you as a Caribbean woman? What are your perceptions of Caribbean mothering? Does your economic or social status impact on the ways in which mothering is viewed or practiced?
So I was waiting for somebody else to say something. I didn't want to jump right in.
Jump right in. I'll jump after you, Marie.
All right. So I think mothering, for me, mothering is fluid, and the most important aspect of mothering which we have, I don't think in the region, in my experience anyway, that we have forgotten or that we don't tend to give enough attention to is love, because we have focused so often on discipline. I think love and freedom are the two things that I think of when it comes to mothering. Number one, you show your child love, and part of that is allowing them the freedom to be themselves, being able to listen to them, not always wanting them to live according to what your rules are, but understand that they are people in their own right. They're not, when we think of children, we think of these beings that are incapable of making decisions, don't have enough knowledge, etc., etc. Yes, they need guidance, but they also do have their own character. And as they learn and grow, the way you're going to find out who they're becoming is by allowing them that space to feed back to you and let you know who they are. And you, in turn, of course, accept that and process that as time goes on. It's fluid, it changes, but always with that grounding of, and sometimes I make a comparison when, your child does some crazy thing, like that thing in the fridge you showed earlier. That was like half my life, you know. Just finding things that they're not supposed to be, and it's like, what, why? Um, but it goes back to love, and I sometimes compare it to people. I say, when we think about the way we treat other people, if some stranger come in your house and then something like that, you probably would have been really nice to them and be like, oh, I understand, it's fine. So think of the child in the same way, like that love that you would show in terms, because very and truly, many of us, we think of other people in ways that, and we give them consideration in ways that we don't give our children. And sometimes you literally have to like go through that process in your mind of, if this was some other situation, some other person, how would I have reacted? And kind of step back sometimes from what could be an angering situation, and just say, I love this person, I would not, not harm this person that you love, and deal with it accordingly. But for me, just fluidity is love, and it's just allowing the freedom to your offspring to be who they are and to go into who they will be.
True. Title?
Greetings, Kellyanne. It's so wonderful to see you and hear you. What mothering means to me, it's a mishmash of different things. Like you, I'm also a womanist mother in that regard. I take on quite a bit of Alice Walker's stuff in terms of seeing mothering as a conscious and a spiritual act. And I also pick, because I grew up Rastafarian, and there are certain little things I pick out from there, but not everything, because it's so rooted in patriarchy as well. But the aspect of Rastafari that is critical of Babylon, so you don't accept anything from the system as automatic, you question. I grew up questioning everything that the system does, so that is also part of my mothering. A teacher question things around her, that she must never accept what is given to her. She must always come with a question. And that is so that questioning of what is around you, and that questioning of doctrine, that questioning of knowledge is also part of how I raise my daughter and any other, or how I influence any of my friends' children sometimes, but not too interferingly, of course. Mine, because I'm an Ifa devotee, I also anchor my parenting in seeing God as it, or as an energy, and also incorporating the notion of God as having feminine energy, and therefore seeing God as goddess, seeing the creator as goddess, and incorporating the orishas, especially the female orishas. And the third one, or the fourth rather, is parenting as a conscious act, where the consciousness of parenting, insofar as seeing the child as, or children as someone who is here for a particular reason, to transform your life as much as you are here to transform theirs. So seeing the child as a teacher as much as somebody that you are going to guide through life, recognizing that children are light for the world. That is really what children are here for. But because of indoctrinating, we flip it around. We don't see children as light. We see children as these little entities to indoctrinate however we choose, and that they belong to us as property, so to speak, or extensions of ourselves. I don't believe that. In conscious parenting, or in conscious mothering, I practice interrogating my own self and my own family patterns and histories, to ensure that I don't transfer any of my own negative family patterns and histories onto her, but recognize that she's here with my own particular purpose of her teaching me that there are things that should not be repeated, so that with her and her less, and being consciousness of why she is here, to be able to listen to what she's here to do, and to teach me as an adult that I can transform myself as well as
True.
her and encourage her to grow. So that's what mothering means to me. I'll leave it
Thanks,
there.
Taito and Maria. Daniel, you could go ahead.
Thanks, Kellyanne. I really am enjoying this discussion. As you know, this is my area that I really like. So I'm very much intrigued by the discussion thus far, and I like the part in the beginning where you said, it's fluid, it's a part of your identity, but not the whole. And I think that is important for me when I think about mothering. It's me centering myself within this whole discourse, within the whole, the sets of practices that we have, because
Mhm.
through research and through my own experience also, I realized that for a lot of Caribbean women, we tend to believe that as soon as we become a mother, then our own lives, our own activities end. And we kind of consume that by our responsibility around that child or children. And we sometimes often ignore ourselves. I mean, we talk to mothers, and I remember in my research asking them, what do you do for leisure activities? And most women began identifying activities that
Yeah.
included the children. And then outside of that, when you probe a little more, it was like just a few minutes in the bathroom by myself, or being able to take a shower
I
without them
don't
knocking
even be
on the
few
door.
minutes because they interrupt you in the bathroom.
Yes. So those were the kinds of things. And we need to think about, in the broader context, how all of that, um, these expectations, these ideas we have around mothering also shape our own practices and regulate our own behaviors. Because I remember a few years ago, maybe two or so, the Attorney General had this comment in the newspaper where he said, women are selfish. And because of that, we have a lot of criminal activities, because all they want to do is go out and party and have fun and not, take care of those responsibilities. So we have to be careful that, in some of these ways that we go about, even talking about it, we are not reproducing some of these ideas around women's roles or women's responsibilities being primarily that tied to the child, because a lot of research speak about that. I know initially when I started research on this, when I looked at the literature, it was literature on family, women in connection to their children, um, in the literary discourses, but not really specifically looking at women and their perspectives and how they identify and who they are become consumed in these
Yeah.
ideas around the family. So I think centering yourself and making sure that, you are not bounded by these stipulations that the child is the in and all of it, but also realizing that you have to take care of you too, that you are a human being, that you are a woman, and you should be able to also enjoy leisure activities without your children. And yeah, just to end it, because I could ramble on. But I enjoyed the discussion, and I think, having that spiritual connection, as you mentioned, with your child
Mhm.
at a particular level, as the children learn from us as well,
Yeah.
and they see. And when we are stressed out, or when we are dealing with
Mhm.
certain things, even if we're trying to hide, they pick up on those kinds of things as
They
well.
do.
So
And then we don't handle them properly either when we are fully stressed.
right. And we
Yeah.
try to protect them and shield them in ways,
Mhm.
that may not be productive. But centering yourself, I think, is also important. Well, that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Bob. Using a gender lens also reveals the ways in which approaches to mothering are gendered and informed, shaped, or biased towards perspectives of a particular sex. Mothering involves constant introspection, as some of you may have alluded to, and is a constant checking and rechecking and questioning the assumptions and observations implicit in society that may present a gender bias. Sometimes within our environment, we encounter visuals and systems and situations in everyday life that reflect the prevailing gender power dynamics that have historically favored men and masculinity, often sometimes rendering women's perspectives and experiences invisible. Here's a video my daughter did for a program called Pink Parliament that empowers girls into the area of politics. Title from one, they're helping spearhead this program, which is a very good program. So I wanted to share this video my daughter did on gender roles. She may look a little bold in the video, but she's actually not. She doesn't even like to hear her own voice in the recording. So to her, this is her words as it relates to gender. You can let me know if you can't hear it.
There's no audio for me, Kellyanne.
Can you hear?
No, nothing.
Okay. All right, give me a second. Let me share the video separately.
You have to stop share the PowerPoint and then
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, give me a second. Okay, let's go again. Can you hear that?
My name is
Can you hear that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Kayanai. What are gender roles? Gender roles speak to the ideologies that define.
Pardon?
We're not seeing, we're hearing.
Oh, you aren't?
No, we're just seeing your screen with the three options: mothering notes, mothering with a gender lens, Kellyanne.
Okay, sorry. Let me try this one more time. Can you see and hold on a second.
My name is
Can you
Kayanai.
see and hear now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry about that.
What are gender roles? Gender roles speak to the ideologies that define who we are expected to act, speak, dress, and conduct ourselves based on our assigned sex. For example, boys are allowed to go outside and do more strenuous work, while some girls have to stay inside and cook, clean, and wash. Girls and women are expected to look after the household, while boys and men are expected to be the financial providers of the home. Males and females were traditionally separated by classes at school, while boys were placed in subjects such as woodwork and agricultural science, while girls are put into subjects like home economics and needlework. Men and women are also separated in the workplace. Employers often choose their employees based on gender roles, such as men would be more likely to be chosen for a job in a mechanic shop than women. Women and girls are the most affected by gender roles, where society puts women at a disadvantage because women are seen as unable to complete laborious or technical tasks because they are seen as delicate and soft. When we subject children to these gender roles, they are expected to fit them. However, when children want to choose careers outside of the allotted societal gender roles, they are looked down upon, which I believe each child should be able to choose their own path in life that is not negatively shaped by society? And how are you going to help challenge societal gender roles which put women and girls at a disadvantage?
So that's a message from Kaya about gender roles. And in her upbringing right now, she's doing meta work and a whole mix of other subjects. And one of the only few girls that are doing meta work. So things like subjects, how schools are gendered and stuff like that really impacts the opportunities that girls especially have or don't have. After hearing this message, I think mothering with a gender lens should be inclusive, intersectional, taking into consideration race, class, identity, and social status. Also, by examining environments for stereotypes that prevail, such as within the school, the home, community, culture, and systemic structures that discriminate. And to share a bit about how gender ideals prevail at school. So there was a situation, I'm quoting what a male teacher said to girls after a quarrel they had. So basically, he said that women have two sets of X chromosomes, and so that means their actions are controlled by their emotions. And the boys have their X chromosomes from their mothers, and they get emotion from their mother. So when boys get into a fight, it's not really controlled by emotion. It's to see who's the strongest. But when girls get into fights, it's more about their emotions and what they feel at the moment. Girls are more emotional because they have two sets of X chromosomes. So y'all girls have to shake hands and make up because it's all about emotion. And these are things that help. Well, it's a negative influence on how girls and boys interact at school, children interact at school, because children are at school sometimes more often than they are home. So it's learned in every aspect or every place that child connects with. I know women growing up in the 60s, when they were outside playing, their younger brother was in charge, and when he was ready to come home, they had to come inside. So even things like that, um, seeing this as I grow up and how it transfers into ideologies that pass down from generation to generation that keep women in a certain position. So to hear from you again, how are girls versus boys treated and expected to behave at school, at home? What are the unnecessary pressures that girls face, like things like policing of their bodies? What about gender chores within the home? Is your son expected to clean the yard when your daughter washes the dishes? Simple things like wearing certain colors. I know a little boy who was given a purple cupcake, icing purple cupcake with icing that's purple, and he cried and refused to eat his cupcake because his teacher told him that purple is not for that color, lilac is not for boys, right? And wearing pink shirts. I know another little boy who used to cry because he didn't want on this pinkish peachish shirt because of the things that they see and hear in society. So, what are some of the conversations you are having with your children about subject selection at school, career choices? Are these conversations gendered? So, let me hear from you again. Feel free to unmute and raise your hand and speak. Anyone?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Thank you. And an excellent program. I was very happy to see this advertised on ECADE and to be a part of this.
Thank you.
So I am a proud mother of I like to say four, right? I think quite a few of my activist friends knows of two, but I've also been mothering my late sister's two children, and it's been quite a phenomenal experience. But as we look at the question here of gender lens, I find that um, you know, I think through my activism, I have learned over the years about parenting from a very neutral position and the importance of that. And so within my own home, um, and my relationship with my children, I don't necessarily have the boy versus girls chores and so on. My son, for me, I would like him to become quite a gentleman, you know. And for me, that does not mean that in order for him to become such, that he can't wash wares or can't wash his clothes and that kind of a thing. In fact, they have pretty much equal responsibilities across the home. The girl has to go help with the dogs and cleaning up after the dogs, and likewise, he would do the same. He has responsibilities for washing wares. They both learn to cook already. They are 12 and almost 15 years old, right? They can hold their own in the kitchen. And even to this date, even though I occasionally have a washing machine, everybody needs to know how to wash their own clothes, particularly their underwears. You know, I don't, um, and so I find that it's that in order for our children to really be well rounded, as we would say in Guyana, I think it is important for them to be molded and sort of nurtured in that sort of way. Um, yeah, and that's it for me. That's what I do. That's what I intend to continue to do. The whole thing around colors, I've always had an issue with that, about persons using colors to define gender roles, and I hope that we will, that is something that we will continue to provide education on, because then we limit our children's capacity to see things and do things differently and to become involved in society in a different way as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before I move on? No? In prep for this discussion, I asked a few women around me to share short snippets of their mothering experiences, as I believe in also sharing the wisdom of women around me. So for me, mothering is not in a vacuum. I share stories with other women and they share with me. Their experiences help me get through and vice versa. So I asked them to share one positive and one challenging or negative experience and how they push through, about the pressures of society that they face, especially during COVID or otherwise. And these were the positive responses. Random acts of physical signs of affection, a kiss, a hug, or an ear pull. So affection and the show of positive emotions that are reciprocated. I remember when my daughter was a baby, I would tell her, I love you over 100 times a day, no lie. And when she was just under 1 year and started to talk, she repeated out the blue, and the how it was said and how I usually say, she would know that that meant something positive, even though she may not have known what it meant at the time. So positive emotions and things like that, our children reciprocate those and duplicate those actions, and I believe it helps build their emotional intelligence and empathy and love and kindness and self-confidence, because oftentimes if a child comes from a home where they love and embrace that love, the external forces are seldom able to break that. So sometimes I get notes like this that when they get up in the morning and may say, I love you, mommy, and things like that. And from young, I would encourage that if she's having a bad day at school, from small, she would write a note to me and I would get it when I come home. So reciprocating love is important. Another mother mentioned that her positive experience was having faith to expand on my interests and talents in preparation to secure another small income to assist the home. So here, meeting certain needs and being able to financially provide for her children is important, along with her talents in developing herself. Daniel spoke about dealing with self. So sometimes when we express ourselves, like, you may find a talent or something that you love to do, and in doing so, developing yourself, it also helps your children. I grew up knowing my grandmother's an entrepreneur. She would sell snacks and drinks and sweets at home, and then down by the church on Sundays, she would have her tray with sweeties and stuff like that, right? And we would have to assist going into town with her and buying the snacks, and then Practices like this taught us as children to use our talents and be self-sufficient, because my grandmother could add on a piece of paper like nothing in a calculator and nothing. You know how the old women used to do it, right? So things like that even are ingrained in us from their mothering practices, their positive mothering practices. Another woman said being an involved parent and making time to play an active part in their child's school life from nursery and onward. So this is critical to know, in that our children know that they have a strong support system backing them. And then some of the challenges that women said they faced was having to balance work along with the new school system. Juggling both is very hard to provide childcare at the workplace or be understanding or lenient. For some mothers, aspects of being there for every important thing in our child's life may be more difficult because some of us have to juggle responsibilities. Um, some of us may work in environments where the employers have no mercy, and that may impact on the time we have to spend with our children. I know some mothers who work night shift, and when they were coming home from work, the children would have to be already off to school, and when the work day was ending, that child would already be asleep. So instances like this, grandparents and aunties were present to provide care. However, some children have to stay home without supervision. And I know some mothers who during this COVID time had to juggle between not having a job or not having to provide for being able to provide financially for their children. Some schools, some jobs are not, they just don't care, right? So you have to decide between, do I give up my job or do I leave my children home and then they'll be at risk for somebody coming into the house and abusing them. So it's things like hard things like that, especially that women experience mothering in that overshadow mothering, especially if you are a single mother. Another challenge is not having the support of family and friends as I try to get my children involved in activities and organizations which I thought would make them rounded and confident individuals. So here it goes back to having some sort of support, and or lack of support can also hinder forward movement. And that support could mean assisting taking children to these activities, or it could also mean moral support and encouragement for other women. Another challenge mentioned was not being able to physically produce my own children. As we know, some women cannot have children, whether it's because of their biological makeup. For example, some women may be transgender who may want to carry their own children and are unable to, or some women may have been born without wombs or have had them removed, or women who may have had multiple miscarriages and challenges with their reproductive health. And in the Caribbean, motherhood and mothering are always attached, are always synced together. And if motherhood is not achieved by a certain age, women are called barren. I don't know if that word is still popular now, but currently the burning question women often get asked is, wait, you don't got no children yet, and you don't got no more. It's time for another child. That's often what get asked, right? But usually I laugh on something like that. I mean, I ask them if they can help me feed, if I get help me feed the child, if I get another child. But some people hurt when those types of questions are asked for one reason or another. And those reasons can vary because, as I mentioned, some women are not able to conceive. Some women may have had miscarriages. And questions like these also speak to the control of women's bodies by the way societal ideals govern and influence the way we operate and view ourselves and others. So just to quickly hear from you again, I know time is getting away. What are some of your positive and challenging experiences with mothering as a godmother, auntie, a neighbor, or a grandmother, or it can be wanted to be a mother or have had children that have passed. So feel free to jump in here again. What are some of your experiences?
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. May I, my name is Josephine.
Go
May I
ahead.
speak without my screen on?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Josephine from ECADE. Okay, what I have found out is, which is a good thing, but okay, I'm a mother of two. But what I find is a good thing is to, in the Caribbean, I can only speak about our situation here, is to raise your child for you, what, okay, for society, yes, but for yourself. With you, when I say for yourself, what I mean is, okay, within what you can control, you give it a lot of love. Whatever the child, you give your child love. Show it a lot of love, whether you have received that kind of love growing up or not, but you always show your child love. But positively, I think what has happened for me is I raise, okay, persons, a typical thing, persons will say something like, why do you have your child walking around at age 5 topless? Okay, why do you have it at the beach running around topless? For me, this is, I am raising my child loving itself. You understand what I'm saying? And if I can, if this is what I can afford to do, for example, yes, it's always good to bring to speak at a level, to bring your child up at a level, but what you, because if you, for example, you're like, okay, you want your child to have this and have that, but you can't afford it. Help your child. I find it is good to raise your child appreciating what you can give. You understand? What, because you see, kids don't grow up knowing these things. It's like, for example, okay, if I am a parent and I am I am a janitor, I have to embrace that. That is what, take pride in that. That is what brings in the money. This is what gives you the little ribbon, the little skirt, which I have purchased. You understand what I'm saying? So if you see Tito's daughter on the corner wearing her latest, whatever it is, it's okay, because that was Tito can afford. You understand? Because if you make that, if you don't embrace the way you are at in life, okay, and you raise this, there will be a problem. The child becomes ashamed. So no matter how much love you give it, because what you're saying and what you're doing is two different things. So I feel I raise my kids not for myself, but to work around my situation. You understand what I'm saying? So if I work at a bank and then we work in an afternoon or whatever, I kind of raise my child to, okay, when you get into the bank, whatever, we're going to be there for this. So you're going to stay in the kitchen here where they'll allocate for you all. I'm not saying everybody should do that, because sometimes you might be working somewhere where your child is allowed to run around. But what makes my child happy? Within where I work, within where I, like, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if I feel my kid could be walking, my spouse and I, my kids could be walking around the house naked, it is not a normal thing. But the kid sees nothing wrong in that, and then why is everybody worried? But I still hug my kids as adults. The first time they go ahead and they just, you know, with peer pressure, you're like, okay, hi, sweetie, you missed out something, darling. Where's that big kiss? Where is it? I don't care. I have a son and a daughter, and I don't care if you go to an all-girls school and all-boys school, you're going to give me that kiss, and you're going to give your daddy that kiss as well. You understand? And my kids are 34 and 31, and up to today, they hug their father, they hug me. It's what you teach them, and it's okay. So I think you have to do for you. And then economics has a lot to do with it. I tried to answer that question, put that point out when the first time. What happened is, if somebody spoke about if you can, you may do things for yourself as well. But if you don't have the money to pay the salary, not enough to pay the nanny to stay in the house with the kid, you can't do that. You understand? You understand? Like a lot of the things in the book look nice, but this is why I'm saying you as a person, you know, you try to do what works for you. Don't worry about society. The society thing is you raise your child to be able to blend into society. You understand what I'm telling you? But you teach it its rights, and you teach it, you know, a lot of other stuff that makes it happy. You understand? Make it happy to want to come home.
Yeah.
You understand? And even happier still when they're 20 and they're gone, you're happy as well. You know, you're not harassing them. Where are you? What are you doing? No, there's a time and place for that. So in my case, that was for me. I didn't find it a challenge, but I was raised strict parents, but then in all my parents' strictness, I realized there are things I could get away with.
Yeah.
So rather than that, I put my children in my shoes, and then I figured to myself, okay, now I could have done that, and I was raised as an older kid. So let me just bring it out to them right there. You know, you let them express themselves, and how you react is not the call out all the time, but you understand? That's how I think. For me, that's what works for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, too. And I agree with you when it comes to raising children to be contented with what you have. That's how I grew up, and that's how I try to raise my daughter. And that's something that has to start from small, because then when the peer pressure hits out there, then they become vulnerable to predators who may offer something that they don't have. If I got bread and butter in my house and that's all I got to eat, my child is be contented with that. She happy to eat butter and bread. You understand? Then she goes to school and got cheap shoes, what people call cheap shoes, and people say she got breadfruit smashers. They, when your child comes home, you have to, I call it a washing out. You know, people brainwash children into something negative. I call it you just have to wash out those things constantly and make your part of mothering for me is it goes back to support and making your child strong to face whatever challenges they have out there. Um, Conscious gender sensitive parenting, when we look at raising a gender sensitive child, recognizes the importance of taking into account the underlying challenges in child rearing in relation to societal values and ideologies. And we talked about finances and all those other things. That being said, we must acknowledge that some women are in situations they have no control over or power. They may be experiencing abuse, stress, related finances, mental health issues, etc. And also taking into account diversities that exist within mothering or styles or methods or children's personalities and needs. Maria talked earlier about giving that child the freedom to be creative, to express themselves. And we also have to make a conscious effort to end gender stereotypes and ideologies by building emotional bonds and intelligence through conversations we have with our children and live the examples we set for our children. Coming up, my mother would tell us the things that she experiences. If she thinks that she discipline us too harsh or was wrong with something, she would also make it a point to apologize to us. It was not a hierarchical situation where I'm the mother, whatever I say goes, and I adopt that same style with my child. If I, for whatever reason, acted in a way I shouldn't have, um, when I come to my senses, I say sorry to my child, right? So things like that. We have to examine, deconstruct and dismantle and change gender ideologies that are restrictive and oppressive for women, especially within the household. So it goes back to chores and saying that because you're a girl, you can't do this and you gotta do this and you gotta stay inside, right? We must also have conversations that sometimes can be difficult. What do your children see, hear, and experience on TV, on the internet? We're in an age of technology where oftentimes the internet does the parenting. Children are left unattended with no guidance. And when we examine our mothering strategies for raising a gender sensitive child or children, there are things I would like us to think about. And this ties into gender equality because what's gender equality before understanding and accepting and acceptance of that child as they are. You can have children raised in the same household with different beliefs, different personalities, and stuff like that. And it also depends on what is happening in your life at that time. So you may be in a period of your life where you're under a lot of stress, like even during this COVID. How has it been for you as it relates to when you were, because during the COVID situation for me, it was extremely stressful initial stages during lockdown. When you're under stress, how do you handle your children? How do you mother, right? Are we perpetuating the same underlying ideals that encourage gender equality? What gender relations exist when they play with friends, and what types of toys and clothing are we buying on a daily basis? What conversations do you have? Do you discuss your child's day? Do we discriminate against others who may be different from us or who don't fit the gender binary? What about people with disabilities? What examples are we setting? Are we teaching our children to be judgmental and discriminate against others? And I think keeping children safe and being that tigress. That's what I like to refer to myself as sometimes. Are we advocating for our children and their differences in a world that discriminates diversity? Do we force them to operate in a system that does not accommodate them? And I want to restate here, I'm not a counselor, but we can share with each other as we have been doing so far. And I see this as a consciousness raising session of sorts, where your coping strategies may help me or someone else here, and vice versa, right? And I want to share some coping mechanisms as it relates to mothering, which can be a tough job. So what are your best practices? How have you been coping before COVID? What about during lockdown? How are you coping now? What support systems do you have in place? What acts of self-preservation and self-care as mothers, aunties, grandmothers, caregivers do we engage in as women? And I know Daniel mentioned that earlier. What about being honest with self and others? Are we in denial about our struggles with mothering? For example, my daughter could be harder at times. She could be naughty because, you know, sometimes children don't do what we want them to do. And then if we raise them to be creative and allow them to have a certain type of freedom and express themselves, we can't expect them to be straight and narrow and doing everything that we want, because it ain't gonna happen. So what type of child are we raising? Are we able to take the bitter with the sweet? And mothering involves continuous introspection and an examination of self. So I will stop here and open for further discussion on the floor. Randall, how are we doing for time? I know we started a bit late and it's just after 2, so you can tell me how much more time we have to go on with discussion.
Okay, the session is normally 1 hour. We started roughly 10 minutes past 1. It's now roughly 8 minutes past 2, but I guess we could go on for at least another 5-10 minutes. If
Okay, no
anyone has
problem.
any questions and stuff that they want to ask.
All right, no problem. Thanks. So the floor is open to you, mothers, whoever is here. Um, Talk to me. Let me have this discussion. Let me learn something from you. Let me learn from each other. How are
Hi,
you?
hi,
Hi, Taitu.
hi, Kelly. It's good to intervene again. I really enjoyed the presentation so far. I kept saying a lot of ashes while you're talking, you know.
Say that again.
Uh,
I didn't hear the last part.
I kept saying ashe while you're
Ah,
talking. You know. When you're talking about coping mechanisms and support systems, I was thinking about how the extent to which care work and childcare and is assumed that, you know, the women, you know, the mummies, the aunties and so on will just figure it out in terms of when women have to juggle care work
mhm.
and care and our careers outside of the home.
Yeah.
And one of the things I started to do was to make demands of the institutions and make demands of agencies or NGOs or whoever it is that I was working with, because sometimes those assumptions really just cannot be met. You know, even if you have a fairly
Mhm.
decent family support system, sometimes not everybody, not there are just times where somebody's just not available to help you.
Mhm.
Arguably, it's easier when you have one child, because I have one child as well.
Mhm.
So what I would find is, like, if there's a meeting and it's at 7 o'clock in the morning, like sometimes you have these breakfast meetings, I would let them know that I'm carrying my daughter.
Mhm.
Then they might say, "Oh, but you can't do this." And I say, "Okay, sorry, well, don't have the not that I'm saying don't have the meet, telling them don't have the meeting. I'm saying these are the conditions under which I can attend.
There's your
I'm
reality,
That's my
exactly.
reality. At
Uh,
7 o'clock, I cannot. At 7 o'clock, there's nobody else to hand over my daughter to. So she's gonna have to come with me. So that's just part of it. So, you know, make space around the dining table, keep things where she can be occupied and so on.
mhm.
So, and then sometimes if there are workshops, it's a similar thing. If the timing of the workshop is smack in the middle of the day when you have to pick up your child and on a particular day you cannot arrange it, to pick her up, or if you do pick her up, you have to carry her to the workshop. They're gonna have to just accommodate her. Now, some places don't, other places do. So what I would insist is, if I'd let them know and say, what do you have in place for mothers who have to go with their children, or parents who have to go with their children, or caregivers, whatever. So it's the same thing if there are things outside of town. You know, is the hotel that you're carrying us all to, is it child friendly? Do they have a kiddies club? You know, if I'm not in a position to say, give my daughter to somebody else, to like to my mom, or because it doesn't always work. So I would demand of the system to make certain kinds of institutional changes and not assume that we will always figure it out. Because sometimes we don't have the resources to figure it out. So some of the things that I would do. And I found, interestingly, that it would come back because she would then be around in meetings and workshops and interacting with adults and hearing things even subconsciously that had begun to raise her own consciousness, and she would then ask me questions at a later date. So it ended up being quite beneficial, you know, even though that was not my intention at the time. You know, I can stop there. I can go on, but I'll stop and
I mean, some women do have those opportunities and some don't. There were times where I had to give up what we would say, breaking a job, going to a job, because I had nobody to keep my daughter. Other people have responsibilities who may have been able to keep her. So then at the other day, at the end of the day, what do you do? Many times when I was doing my undergrad, my daughter would be in the back of the lecture room with me, and I would walk with her. That time she was like 6, man. She did it a really long time. I would walk with blanket, toys, headphones, everything, right?
Everything
In the back. I mean, some tutorials you won't be able to take the child, but then there are some places that they don't allow, or they look at you funny when you walk in with your child. But like, what else are you supposed to do? So these are some of the things that happen. Some women, some bosses are really disgusting. You can't bring your child to the workplace, and you can't take time not even to take them to the doctor. So it's be a hard decision. It's be hard decisions, and sometimes for all women it is be so difficult. Anybody else? Hello, Joya, Marissa, Denise, Raven. Anybody else want to add to the discussion?
Hi.
Hi, Raven.
So I joined late, but I did hear most of the stuff. So I have a 4-year-old godson, and he was not very talkative um in the first 2.5, 3 years. So when he left preschool, I was going for him most of the time, like mornings, picking him up, taking him to school, and evenings, picking him up and having him here till sometimes midnight, or his mother works at a hotel, so sometimes she would miss the last bus and would have to get the shuttle. And the shuttle oftentimes would not want, depending on the driver, would not want to stop for her to get him. So he would have to sleep here, and I take him to school in the morning. So after like a couple months, almost a year, she found that when he came home from by me, he was talking a bit more, as opposed to before, when it was just her mainly taking care of him. But I guess the difference in the environment helps stimulate his um attentiveness or development. Like y'all said, sometimes I would have meetings and would have to literally go to the meeting with him straight from preschool. I would have to have him watching my phone, Baby Shark or the ABC thing with headphones in, so he doesn't make noise and that kind of stuff. And there really is the difference in mothering skills, that difference between his mother and I is visible. And it is something to know that everybody, like you said, does not have it figured out. And again, like, I'm trans, like I can't produce my own children. So these things helping someone develop and having a sense of openness to things that they may have not had other exposure to, it's really good to help the generation change and be more adaptive and open to see things around them. Because only yesterday I had him and he said he has a friend at school that looks like a girl, but he calls the name, it's a boy's name. And I asked him mother, and she said, yeah, but his parents are mixed. The child's parents are mixed. So they let the child look however they want, express however they feel. And this child is practically his best friend. So every evening when I collect him from school, he always wants to get coded for him and the other child. And the mother saw me, the child's mother saw me, and she said she knew me from my activism work. And she said she would have never guessed that I am the auntie who my godson is always talking about on mornings when the children and his mother meets up with them sometimes. So it is good that I guess, although I'm not his mother, I'm close enough to give the support to help him develop in this ever changing, not so accepting world.
That's great. And to add to what you said, you mentioned being a trans woman. My daughter has friends at school, and I guess it's through my activism when it comes to sexuality and other things. She is accepting of all persons. Her group of friends have people who are now starting out their identity, who identify as gay, who may identify as trans or non-binary. And sometimes the stories that these children give in terms of how they're treated at home, how they're stifled because of the gender binary, it affects them seriously mentally. So how what examples are we setting as it relates to discriminating against others who are different? How are we raising our children? Are we giving them a space to be themselves or to explore? Because sometimes at the teenage age they get confused, or they may not, they may be wanting today and something else tomorrow. Are we allowing them a space to explore themselves? Anybody else want to add? Della, you wanna speak? I see you put something in the chat. You can unmute your mic and talk to us.
Good afternoon. Hi.
Hey.
I was just reading what's in the chat, and I was just agreeing with J. Rubin, Josephine, that yes, unfortunately, you find a lot of situations where female bosses who you think would be sensitive and would understand the role that mothers play in their children's lives would be more sensitive and more understanding, which does not always happen. It's like teaching where when a teacher moves up to being a principal and they are harsh towards their teachers, and sometimes you have to ask, don't they remember what it was like being a teacher? And that happens. But I really enjoyed this session. I'm happy to know and to have reiterated for me that I did not raise my son with gender lens, but I raised him as just the child that is going to be. For me, I did not want children. I say that openly. My son is aware that I didn't want children. And I had this child, but I did not want a dependent child. And I did not want a child that, for me, at some point, this child would be leaving my home. And I would want the comfort of knowing that when he leaves my home, he is a good citizen of society and he is able to take care of himself. So that is for me what guided my path as a parent, as a single parent. And it was ensuring that I was raising an independent individual capable of critical thinking, a good citizen of society, and somebody that would be able to take care of themselves in the long run when they no longer lived with me. In my home, none of those things exist because mommy's there and mommy will take care of everything. But when he steps out that door, all of those things come into play. So sometimes I want to box him and tell him, so why not in the house? I'm not seeing it in the house, but definitely when he walks out the door, all of those things come into play. So I feel vindicated that I've done my job pretty well.
Anybody else before we close off? Joyanne, Zell, Denise, you have anything to add? Maria, before we end? Don't want to keep you here too long and bore you. Feel free to unmute.
Nah, this session was fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Just a lot of reflection and reconsidering parenting, and I think it's worth reconsidering all the time. How we have done it, how we can, because I think there's always there are always opportunities to, no matter the age of your offspring. I won't say child because you're not the age of a child again. At certain level, at certain age, your offspring, there's always still the opportunity to reflect and to try to do things a little different, and also to try to ensure that whoever is coming after, the road is a little easier for them, and that you, in terms of them being a positive parent and parenting whoever comes across their path, as you mentioned, it's not always about your child, and that they need to provide that positive example. And your stories, I love them because all of us have so many stories.
There are a lot more.
Yes, let me tell you, and especially with the public, through schools, random people on the street who feel that they need to police people's gender, who feel they need to police people's behavior, and box them into the binary of, you're male, this should be your action, or should not be action, or female, this should be your action, just randomly on the street, There's so much that we have to counter, so much quote unquote tradition that we have to counter. So it's always good to have these reflective spaces, just to remind ourselves that we really and truly are looking at our viewpoint on this issue is not, we're not in a vacuum in terms of that, and that there are like-minded people, and just to point out the positive aspects of it and how that can, as Ella mentioned, develop a well-rounded individual who contributes positively to the space around them. That's just something that's invaluable. So thanks for the discussion.
You're welcome. Anybody else before I turn it back over to Randall? Going once, going twice. If anybody doesn't have anything else to say, just want to say thank you again to ECADE for inviting me to do this discussion on mothering. I'm not an expert, as mentioned at the beginning, but I am passionate about making sure my child and the children around me who I come into contact with and who I have a hand at raising get the best possible life as it relates to how I treat them and the things that I teach them. And I know many of you out there are doing the same. As Daniel mentioned, remember to take time for self, because sometimes we need to step back and regroup. And take time for self, because if we are broken or if we are stressed, we can't give our children the best possible mother that they can have. So again, thank you, and back over to Randall.
Yes, and thank you very much, Karen. I think that presentation was really good. I think from the one of the workshops that we've had, I must say that one stood out for me. I'm not a father, I don't have any kids, but I learned quite a few things, which I probably could help a few other people, raising their child. So with that, I say thank you again, and thanks to all those who tuned in and listened and participated in this session. And join us next week, Wednesday, for our final session for the year, which will be on LGBTQ plus self-expression and community safety. Well, in the Eastern Caribbean, where we will be discussing, freedom, the rights and freedom of expression in different spaces, and that will be done by Grandchild. So thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. And